Chapter 2: Forbidden Love. Whispers of Treason. The whispers, initially a subtle tremor in the air, escalated into a full-blown storm. The clandestine meeting, a stolen moment of solace amidst a war-torn landscape, became a beacon of dissent, a focal point for the simmering resentments and entrenched prejudices of both the Nightshade coven and the Sunstone kingdom. Gia, nestled within the shadowy embrace of the coven, felt the tightening coils of suspicion around her. The familiar faces of her sisters, once comforting, now held a wary distance, their eyes assessing, questioning. The air hummed with unspoken accusations, the silence more damning than any overt condemnation. The news of her encounter with Lysander, a Sunstone prince, a scion of their sworn enemy, had spread with horrifying speed. It had become a venomous seed, planted in fertile ground of ancient hatred, blossoming into a poisonous flower of mistrust. The whispers, once confined to shadowed corners, now echoed through the coven's hallowed halls, twisting her actions, her motives, her very essence. She was no longer simply Gia, a respected member of the coven; she was a traitor, a pawn of the Sunstone kingdom, a threat to their very existence. Morwen, the high priestess, her eyes like ships of obsidian, became the architect of Gia's downfall. She wielded the ancient prophecies like weapons, subtly twisting their interpretations to suit her agenda. Passages that once spoke of unity and understanding were recontextualized, their original meaning obscured by a shroud of fear and paranoia. Gia's actions, once seen as an act of compassion, were now framed as a dangerous betrayal, a weakness that could tear the coven apart. Morwen's power was formidable, her influence absolute. She carefully cultivated an atmosphere of suspicion, using her knowledge of the coven's vulnerabilities to sow discord and fear. She played on their primal fears, their ingrained prejudices, painting Gia as a threat to their sacred traditions, a viper in their midst. The accusations weren't merely spoken in hushed tones, they were woven into the very fabric of the coven's rituals, subtly infused into the incantations and spells. The once sacred ceremonies became instruments of suspicion, their ancient rhythms now carrying the undercurrent of judgment. Gia felt the weight of these accusations, the silent condemnation that seeped into the very stones beneath her feet. The magic that once flowed freely within her, a river of power and potential, now felt constricted, choked by the suffocating atmosphere of distrust. Meanwhile, in the sun-drenched lands of the Sunstone kingdom, Lysander found himself entangled in a web of political intrigue. The warmth of Gia's touch, the echo of their shared magic, paled in comparison to the chilling reality of his situation. The news of his clandestine meeting had reached the ears of Lord Valerius, a man whose ambition knew no bounds, whose ruthlessness was legendary. Valerius, a master manipulator, saw Lysander's growing affection for Gia not as a romantic entanglement but as a weakness, a chink in the armor of the Sunstone kingdom. Lysander, once the shining paragon of the Sunstone lineage, now faced accusations of weakness, of being swayed by enemy magic. His very loyalty was questioned, his actions misinterpreted, his motives twisted to fit Valerius's narrative of betrayal and conspiracy. Valerius, a man accustomed to wielding power through fear and intimidation, launched a subtle campaign of disinformation. He disseminated rumors, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of the king's advisors, portraying Lysander as a pawn of the Nightshade coven, a traitor to his own kingdom. He painted vivid pictures of potential chaos and disarray, skillfully playing on the insecurities and fears of those around him. The accusations of treason, though aimed at Gia and Lysander, cast a shadow over their entire world. The fragile truce between the kingdoms threatened to unravel, the delicate threads of diplomacy snapping under the weight of suspicion and fear. The two lovers, once united in their shared affection, found themselves increasingly isolated, trapped in the tightening net of political intrigue. Their forbidden love, once a source of solace and hope, had become a catalyst for conflict, a beacon of defiance in a world steeped in ancient hatreds. The weight of their transgression pressed heavily upon them, threatening to crush the nascent flame of their love before it could truly bloom. Their fight was no longer a battle against the forces of nature, but a desperate struggle for survival, for the very right to love in a world that sought to tear them apart. The whispers of treason had become a roar, and Gia and Lysander were caught in its devastating current. Their love, once a fragile flower, now had to contend with the full force of a political storm. The future seemed bleak, the path ahead uncertain, yet their love, tenacious and defiant, held on, a flickering candle in the face of a raging tempest. The court buzzed with whispers of treason, the air thick with suspicion. Lysander's once unquestioned authority was now challenged, his decisions scrutinized, his every move watched. The warmth of his once loyal following had cooled, replaced by a chilling distance. The once confident prince, secure in his position, found himself increasingly isolated, his own council turning against him, whispering doubts and questioning his sanity. His attempts to defend himself, to explain the genuine nature of his connection with Gia, fell on deaf ears. Valerius, a master of rhetoric and manipulation, ensured that Lysander's voice was drowned out, his words twisted and distorted to fuel the rising tide of suspicion. The political machinations of both Valerius and Morwen were intricately woven, subtly mirroring each other in their ruthless pursuit of power. Both understood the threat posed by Gia and Lysander's relationship, the potential it held to upset the precarious balance of power, to shatter the centuries-old animosity between their kingdoms. Their actions weren't merely driven by personal ambition, they were fueled by a deep-seated fear of change, a resistance to the potential for peace and reconciliation.